This is a 1981 Fairchild A-10C Warthog, and it's the newest version of the A-10 Close Air Support aircraft. The A-10's always been known for being rugged and reliable, never really having the best tech, but the C model adds a lot of new features, and today I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Planes and Bids, which is my enthusiast aircraft auction website for cool planes from the modern era. We've had some great sales recently, including this McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom, which sold for $3 million, and this MIL Mi-26 Halo, which sold for $20 million. If you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast plane from the 1960s and up, Planes and Bids is the place to do it. I've borrowed this A-10 from the 74th Flying Tigers, which is a fighter squadron stationed at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia. They've flown a lot of cool attack aircraft, including on combat deployment. If you want to see Air Force attack aircraft in action, check out the 74th Fighter Squadron, the Flying Tigers. So let's talk Warthog. The A-10 was designed back in the 1960s to support ground troops against Soviet armored forces. It was pretty bare bones, no real built-in targeting systems, and couldn't really operate well at night. That changed in 2006 when A-10s were upgraded in the Precision Engagement Modification Program, which added compatibility with new targeting pods and data link, bringing it up to date with other Air Force aircraft. And today, I'm going to review this one. First, I'll take you on a tour of the A-10 and show you all of its interesting quirks and features, and then I'll get it up in the air and fly it, and then I'll give it a Doug score. I'll start the quirks and features of the A-10 with getting in. You open up the canopy and climb in on the ladder here, nothing too unusual, but you'll notice the belt line is pretty high. That's because behind the firewalls here is a layer of titanium armor. Fairchild calls this the titanium bathtub, and it's proof against 23mm anti-aircraft rounds. They did everything they could to make sure the A-10 could fly even after being shot, so you'll find basically everything is armored or redundant. That's pretty cool. Moving on to the cockpit, the first thing you'll notice are these two multifunction color displays, MFCDs. These are new for the A-10C model, and they can be used for targeting or situational awareness or weapons information. My favorite is here. Press the message button and you can send messages through the situational awareness data link. This way you can share targeting or navigation information with other aircraft. You wouldn't think of instant messaging as a feature for attack aircraft, but the A-10C has it. Anyway, one of the big new features of the A-10C is targeting pod capability. You can see it here on one of these MFCDs. You can slew around and designate targets with it. It's also connected to the helmet, so you can point it wherever you look. Today that's pretty standard, but it's new for the A-10, and it's really nice to have. And next up, we'll move on to the airspeed indicator. It's very basic. You just get a needle with the airspeed in knots, but it goes all the way up to 550 knots. This is the most optimistic airspeed indicator I've ever seen. You'd be lucky to see 300 knots in the A-10. I have no idea how they expected anyone to get an A-10 all the way up to 550, but it's there anyway. Next, we'll move on to the head-up display in the A-10, which has different modes for navigation or ground attack or air-to-air. I want to bring your attention to the strafing mode, where you'll find this pipper showing where the rounds will land. Nothing too unusual there, except it's actually two pippers. Take a look, one slightly lower than the other. That's because the different bullets in the A-10's combat ammunition mix are different weights. So there are separate impact points for armor-piercing and high-explosive rounds. You won't see that on a lot of other aircraft. One notable item is here on the left side console, where you'll find the flight control systems. You'll notice this big red switch, and this activates the manual reversion system. The A-10 has two independent hydraulic systems. That's already more than most other planes, but Fairchild said, no, that's not enough. So they added this manual reversion to activate cable linkages so you can still fly even if both the hydraulic systems are completely disabled. It's total overkill, but that's what you get with the A-10. But my favorite switch is here on the back of the left side console, and that's where you'll find the ground safety override. Normally you can't fire weapons on the ground due to the weight on wheels safety. That keeps friendly ground crews safe, but just in case that's damaged, you can flip this switch and fire weapons even if the plane thinks it's on the ground. You won't find that in a lot of other planes. And moving on to the exterior of the A-10, you'll notice, well, it's not exactly sleek. Everything is separate, not really integrated, and that's intentional. The engineers designed the A-10 so everything is redundant and has its own individual space. This spreads out components so that no one shot could disable more than one system. And over here at the tail of the A-10, there are a couple of interesting items. First up are the engines. The A-10 is powered by these General Electric TF34 engines. You can see these are big high bypass engines and they get good fuel economy, about 5,000 pounds per hour combined. The engines are mounted high above the tails, and this protects them from debris and shields them from infrared missiles. It's also practical on the ground. Since the engines are up so high, you can leave them running while rearming with more bombs. That's pretty clever. Also on the tail of the A-10, you'll notice these round things, and you might wonder what these are, and the answer is they are sensors for the A-10's missile warning system. These are ultraviolet sensors mounted all over the plane to detect the flash from a rocket engine when a missile is launched. Some planes can tell when a radar missile is approaching, but not infrared missiles, which are commonly used at short range and low altitude where the A-10 flies. So the missile warning system is there to detect infrared missiles that a radar warning receiver wouldn't pick up. Next up on the exterior of the A-10, we have the landing gear. You'll notice there are no main landing gear bay doors, and this leaves them exposed even when retracted. This is so even if the gear are damaged and can't extend, the wheels can still contact the ground and provide steering with the toe brakes for an emergency landing. Moving on to the nose of the A-10, I want to point out the paint scheme. I've waited a long time to review an A-10 because I've wanted to review one with this specific paint scheme. The base color is called Federal Standard 36320. I think it's pretty attractive. But what I really love is this shark nose art. It looks so aggressive. Not all A-10s are painted like this, but I wish more were. And while we're here at the nose, we finally come to the gun. The A-10 carries this GAL-8 Avenger 7-barrel 30mm rotary autocannon, and it is totally ridiculous. This gun is so huge, the nose gear has to be offset just to make room for the barrel. The GAL-8 weighs over 4,000 pounds and fires 3,900 rounds per minute at an average cost of over $40 a round. It costs over $31,000 to fire this gun for 12 seconds. Absolutely insane. And so those are the quirks and features of the A-10 Warthog. Now it's time to get it up in the air and see how it flies.
Alright, flying the A-10. Gonna drop down to low altitude here. It's not a fighter, but it can still turn really tightly. Feels really good at low speed. I'm doing around 200 knots right now, but I don't have any control problems at all. Acceleration's not actually that bad. It's got a decent amount of thrust. It's a wall at about 300 knots though. Like, you get to 300 and that's it. You're not getting any faster. But then that's not really the point in a plane like this. You kind of want to be loitering at low speed, keeping guard over an area, and frankly this is a really good choice for that kind of mission. Alright, firing the GAL-8. my god. Alright, one more time. I don't know how much you can see on the camera. The whole plane shakes every time you fire the gun. Then you smell the gunpowder in the cockpit after you fire. I mentioned how expensive it is to shoot, but that is absolutely worth it. You really experience it with every sense you have. That is amazing.
And so that's the Fairchild A-10C Warthog. Some people don't like adding technology to the A-10, they think it will become delicate and fragile, but frankly I like these upgrades and I think most people will remember the A-10C fondly as the ultimate Warthog. Anyway, now it's time to give the A-10 a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the A-10 looks tough and rugged, but not exactly beautiful. Examples with nose art look better though, it gets a 4 out of 10. Acceleration, it has a thrust-to-weight ratio of 0.59 to 1, although speed is limited past 300 knots, and it gets a 4 out of 10. Next is handling. The A-10 turns surprisingly tight and has good low-speed control, although it's no fighter, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Fun factor is high, the gun is a blast to shoot and low altitude operations are enjoyable, it gets a 10 out of 10. Cool factor is surprisingly high, the A-10 isn't particularly glamorous, but ground troops everywhere recognize the Warthog, it gets an 8 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 31 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The A-10C is about up to date with other planes of its class and it gets a 7 out of 10. Comfort is average for a plane of this class and it gets a 3 out of 10. Quality is high. The A-10 is practically indestructible and has multiple redundancies in every system. It gets a 10 out of 10. Practicality is good. The A-10 can carry up to 16,000 pounds of ordnance, although it can't carry some advanced standoff weapons, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Finally, value. Including upgrades, the A-10C costs $31 million adjusted for inflation. The gun is expensive to fire compared to smaller aircraft cannon, but it's still cheap compared to other ordnance. It gets an 8 out of 10 for a total daily score of 33 out of 50. Added up in the Doug score is 64 out of 100, which places it here against other subsonic attack aircraft. Some newer aircraft are faster and have better tech, but the A-10 matches or beats out most older aircraft, and nothing can compare to that gun.